video is to talk about Norton Commando Electrics. I must apologise for not posting this sooner. Life gets in the way. At least now I have fully retired, so I can now concentrate on such things as the bike. But my philosophy on wiring a bike or a car or my Dodge truck, which we'll talk about some other time, is to actually break it down into sections. So on a motorbike like this, you have the rear section, rear light and things, the center section, which tends to be the battery, the rectifier, regulator, potentially, and in this case an ignition switch. Some of the earlier Triumphs and Beezers and things had an ignition switch in the center, and then the front section. And the front section includes the handlebar switches, headlights, the speedo rev counter lights, and often in this case you can lump in the ignition, depending where the ignition coil is. For instance, on the some BSAs, the ignition coil is behind the engine. Tridents are the same, so that that would be in the center section. This one, the ignition coil, as I've seen in another video, is actually in front of the engine and feeding down to the electronic ignition box, which tends to, in my mind, put it into the front of the engine. Into the front part of the bike. I tend to make sketches of where the wires are going to go, and I have a Lucas crib sheet that shows me the functions of the various colours. And I try to follow those colours as much as I possibly can, and then I make a sketch which then later on will turn into a wiring diagram. I don't tend to join all the wires up. So if you have a wire in the back sections, say the brake light wire, which is a brown, the brake light switch is in the center section and is also a brown, and then there's a power that comes excuse me, in this case from the ignition switch, which is a power feed. So when you turn the ignition on, you have power to the brake switch, and then closing that brake switch will allow the brake light to come on. So the brake switch will show a wire coming out that says brown. The rear light will have a wire coming out that says brown, and there's no connection between. This simplifies the schematic a lot more than actually joining up all the wires and then trying to follow them through and things. Makes the wiring much less daunting. So for instance, on some bikes, like certainly some of my Triumphs and such, like, I can have two wires coming up the back, coming up to the middle. That would be the rear light and the brake light. Now I normally run a third wire, which is the ground, and certainly I found over many years that if you're running incandescent bulbs, ones that heat up, a brake wire, a ground wire, excuse me, going back to from the light back directly to the battery helps make those incandescent bulbs last a lot longer. You're not relying on skimpy connections through the mudguard and the chassis and things. So my next issue is to make sure that all of the parts are actually working. There's no point in wiring a bike up if you're wiring up faulty parts. You can get yourself in an awful mess trying to work out, well, have I wired it wrong, or is there a fault there, or is there a fault somewhere else that is affecting that? So the idea is to be very logical and do various parts, check that part, make sure it's right, have an idea of where it's going to go. For instance, in some of the wiring you see here, I've already got cables coming from the middle going up, and will be going into the headlight bolt to make various connections, and there are obviously connections for the switches and such like. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the dip switch. On a Norton Commando there is a picture in the user's manual that shows you what all the switches do. You'll note that on this Commando I have a Triumph front hydraulic master, which is then feeding down to the hydraulic caliper on the front disc, and we'll talk about that at some other point. The reason of using a Triumph rather than a BSA or Norton is that this is actually designed to give you good front brakes. The Norton one, they actually made the piston quite small so that it gave the same feel as a drum brake. They didn't want people doing lots of stoppies all over the place, I guess. The other advantage of using a Triumph one, and this is from Les Harris, is that you can then switch on the bolt on the Lucas headlights, Lucas switch, handlebar switch, and I like these. When I bought my Triumph Trident in 1974, I think it was, it came with these, and the bike prior to that, I had a BSA 250 Starfire, and that also had these fitted. In fact, most British bikes did at that time, and I got very used to those. And the BSA Bantams and various other bikes that I've had have had sort of like a different switch cluster, and a lot of them are very unreliable, and that was back then, and now they're even more unreliable. So I go with the Lucas ones. I've actually had quite a lot of experience in here, and I will show you in this video what I did with this one to make the dip main switch work. This switch should be dip and main. However, this particular Lucas switch is set up for a 3-position switch, which would usually be indicators, and that is on the left hand. So the cables inside this switch are mostly the blue ones, which go to the dip and the main. There's a power in, which is the white one, and then purple and black, which is the horn push. So I can have flash, horn, and dip and main. However, I need to convert this switch from a 3-position switch to a 2-position switch, and that's just changing this particular switch internally. So we'll take this off. Get that just slightly connected so it doesn't all fall apart. This one's a little tricky to get at because of the bolt for the lever, which I could take off. In fact, I think I'm going to have to, because I can't get it out. Actually, probably don't need to take it all the way out. And there we go. So you'll note that some of the screws are long and a couple of them are shorter. The longer ones obviously go, there we go, I didn't quite want to do, hang that there, and hang that there. So I can now take this switch off and put the Allen key away so I don't lose it. Take the clips off. There we go. The clip back on there. And what I will now do is take this apart and make this switch change. I'll show you that in just a moment's time. One thing I did notice while taking this switch from the handlebars is that the Lucas name, the Lucas name is actually upside down. Now these switches are symmetrical, so it's very easy to turn that around and open it up and make the Lucas on the top. It's just fuss budgetary, but inside the switch is this plastic panel, and with that supports the switch with the bullion copper connections on it, and then the wires soldered to it. And you can see that the switch, the push button switch, which is that one there, goes to the purple and black wire, so that's the horn, and the other push button switch goes to the blue and the white wire, so that's the flash. And then the power comes in on the white one, and then the main switch, which is between dip and main. Now I'm going to actually use a set of relays because I can, and these relays will actually be wired together so that I actually have a power coming in directly from the battery, and then it will go through the switch connectors to either the main or the dip beam, and I only then need one lead from my switch to power that, to make the changeover from dip to main. And the power to the lights will actually be controlled by the ignition switch, because on the Norton there's a 4-position switch. So let's take this unit apart, and I've obviously been in this before because the little screws, internal screws, are actually Allen screws, although still the type of self-tapper, rather than the little Phillips screws that are, or can be, very difficult to take out. You have to lever the wire out of the way to get to the other side. Now once you actually release this, and it's useful to hold the PCB in place, because there's some bits and pieces in here which I'll show you as soon as I get there. There you go. As we release this, there's the switches, and then we have inside here a ball bearing, and then the 2 push buttons, and we need to take the middle unit out, capture the ball bearing, and this comes out, this switch paddle comes out quite easily at an angle, and I'll just show you the difference between the 3-position and the 2-position. there are various switch options, and a lot of them are available in these little green boxes, and this one in fact came from RGM Norton, and this one had a don't remember, but you can see that you can get red switches, you can get switches that are much shorter or longer depending on the year. They are again symmetrical, so you can have them on the brake side or the clutch side. Now they also come in two different flavors. There's the one that is the 3-position, and while it's difficult to see, the bar on either side of the spring is actually diagonal, alternate, whereas perhaps on this red one it's easier to see. The bar on this one is in line either side of the switch, so this is a 2-position switch, whereas this one with the alternate bars, I'm not sure how well that shows up, is a 3-position. So I'm going to use a black 2-position switch and put this into the body of the unit, and in this case I'm going to make sure the screws didn't fall out, and I'm going to have the Lucas at the top. So we feed this in and it goes in at an angle, and then sits in there, sits down into the bottom, and then we need the ball bearing. Now, some people suggest you put a little bit of Vaseline to keep it in place. I don't tend to do that because I don't like Vaseline inside switches. And then so once the parts are captured inside, you need to hold the PCB or plastic switch part down while you feed the screws in. Always a little bit fiddly, but it is doable. This is one of the reasons I like the Allen screw. Maybe not so much. Usually with the Allen screw ones you can lift it up and tighten it down. And careful not to cross thread it. Once it is reasonably tightened down, you can actually check to see that the switch is working and it will not go the other way, and the push buttons work, and then we can actually do the connection tests using a voltmeter or light switch or whichever, to actually test to make sure that you got all the switches working. One of the reasons why this particular body is upside down is because the cable outlet, there's a cutout, is actually on a side whereby it needs to be on to face in towards the speedo, etc., rather than out the other way. So the switch actually works on the output side. So anyway, that's there are some of these units have Lucas on both sides, and some of them actually have them the other way up. They've actually been designed to work on the brake side rather than the clutch side.